Um, hey guys, I am going to teach y'all today on basically how to blend your colors using only your primary colors. So what you need to have with you, first off, in your sketchbook, if you're in class, you're going to get one of these, and make sure you put your name on it, first off. But if you are not in class, you're going to need to kind of redraw this on a scrap piece of paper in your sketchbook. Either way, I will say a lot of people tend to get hung up on the squares, circles, and triangles. The shapes don't matter. This is just a worksheet that put these as different shapes to help, I guess, know the difference in the types of colors. So don't get hung up on that. That is not a big deal. You could do them all in circles if you want, like we did for our lesson yesterday. But however, you do use this, a new sheet of paper, because of all the notes that we took on our color wheel yesterday. I don't really want you to color on top of that. So anyways, what you're going to need to do this is we're only going to use red, yellow, and blue, our three primary colors, to make all the other colors. So double check and make sure that they are actually the colors that you think they are. If you're working with a brand that's like Crazy Art, it might say blue, but it's actually purple, or like a blue-green, or it might say red, but it's like a red-orange. So just make sure you test it. If you don't have color pencils, you could also do this with crayon. But for those of you that are at home, I would not do this with marker, just because marker does not blend the way I'm going to be showing you how to blend this. So we're also going to be using this technique on an assignment afterwards. So you're going to need to know how to blend your colors, preferably with color pencil. But again, the same technique would apply to crayons. If you are at home and you don't have those, but you have, say, oil pastels or chalk pastels, you could probably make that work as well. But everybody should probably have crayons or color pencils available to them. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and start. We're going to start first by just filling in our primary colors. Originally, this handout had it like switched to where the circles were the primary and the squares were the secondary, but I wanted to fix that so that we have our yellow at top. So our primary is kind of like how we did yesterday in our lesson. So go ahead and fill in your primary colors. So we're going to start with yellow at the top. And in case you forgot, we always put yellow at the top because yellow is the lightest color. So I always try to remember that by thinking like, the sun is yellow. Yep, the sun's in the sky. It's up above. That's just how I can remember that. So, okay, we're going to fill in with yellow. Now, while we're doing this, I'm going to talk about just using some good color pencil technique too. You always want to make sure that you do your strokes smaller and really close to overlapping, almost like when we were shading with blended pencil point or blended pencil side. If you remember that lesson, we overlap our strokes. We usually need to do a couple different layers to make it look nice and blended. So we don't want to see our stroke marks, okay? We want to make sure we get along our edges. So while we're doing this, make sure you're doing good practice on your coloring technique too, okay? So I got my yellow in again, blue and red. It doesn't really matter which order they go in. I always tend to put blue over here. So that's what I'm going to do. So I always kind of start too when I color with kind of like a medium type of pressure. I don't go too hard or too light. But again, I'm going to overlap my strokes really close so that I'm not leaving big gaps around them. We don't want it to look streaky. Okay. And if it does, like you can kind of tell, I have kind of a thinner layer there, but I usually always go over it in another direction too to blend out my strokes. So just keep that in mind when you're doing color pencil. You need to be patient. You do not want to rush it and make it look streaky, because then the quality of your work goes down, and that would also affect your grade. So you have to be patient when you're doing color pencil. But again, it's just like with our shading techniques. We want to overlap our strokes to get a good blend. The only difference is we can't use a blending stick or pencil or tissue to really blend well. They might work like a tiny, tiny bit, but they're not going to do the same kind of blending job that our blending stick would do. So you have to just do it with the pencil itself. And it gets better with practice, okay? So, again, if 2 layers doesn't cut it, do a 3rd layer. But you want to not be able to see which direction you applied your strokes, okay? So I've got my 3 primaries done. If you don't, go ahead and pause it until you get it done. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my secondary colors. So if you recall in the lesson, we put our secondary colors based off of what 2 primaries make them. So our secondary colors are green, orange, and purple. And we would put green in between yellow and blue because yellow and blue make green, okay? Now, I will give you a little tip here. When you're working with a light color and a dark color, I always suggest you put the light color down first because it's always easier to darken a tone than it is to relighten it. So if you start with the dark color, it's harder to correct it if you are too dark to begin with. So my suggestion, and I'll probably say it every time we do a color that includes yellow, but anytime we're going to do one of these colors that includes yellow, I'm going to always put yellow down first, okay? So with green, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with my yellow. And just like on my squares, I'm going to hit the edges first. I feel like that's always a good start, and then I work my way into the middle because you don't want to neglect your edges. And sometimes you can also, if you don't have good success with just doing strokes, you can do circular motions to color. I do that also when I shade. I'll do circular, depending on what kind of finish I want. Do I want kind of I usually do circular strokes when I'm, say, shading like skin tones and stuff. I feel like that just kind of helps play in the skin texture a little. But you can do straight strokes, circular strokes, whatever helps you get a smoother look. Okay, so I've got my yellow base, okay? I'm going to ease into it, but I'm going to basically color it again with my blue, but I'm going to go a little bit lighter. I'm not going to try to go super heavy with my blue, just because I can always darken it. Again, I don't want to start too dark and not be able to lighten it. But usually when you're blending colors, especially with color pencil, it's going to take a couple layers to get it right. Even if you're working with, pastels and you're blending, you're going to need to probably do a couple layers. So generally what I do is I do like the light tone or one layer, the middle layer, and then I usually have to go back on it a 3rd time just to get it, maybe I want a little bit more light to it, or the lighter color also kind of helps as a blender as well after you apply the dark color. Okay. Now they do make, for those of you that are interested, they do make colorless blenders for color pencils, but those work better with certain brands. Certain brands of color pencils are more creamy than, say, Crayola. The ones that I always use are Prismacolor pencils. For those of you that, Christmas is coming up, Prismacolor pencils are expensive, but they are really good. They blend really nice. They're a lot creamier, and I think the color is a little bit more saturated, so you just get a better blend. And then they usually come with a colorless blender, but you can also use white as a blender too. That's kind of one reason why we have white color pencils. So you can see that I've got a green tone here, and all I've done is layered my blue and yellow together. Now, it's not as pretty of a blend just because of the different colors. So I might kind of go back and use my yellow to maybe blend that blue just a little bit better, even it out. There's some spots that got a little darker than others, but that's okay. I'm not looking for it to be perfectly smooth, but I do want to be able to see that by layering these colors together, you get a green tone, okay? And that's going to continue through our next set of secondary colors. So I'm going to move on to purple because, again, yellow or red and blue make purple, or also known as violet. Now these two I would say are both kind of darker tones, so I don't really think it matters which one you put down first. If I had to guess, red's probably a bit lighter, but it's still it's a darker tone versus say like yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and put down my red. And also keep in mind too, if you're using like a light blue versus a regular blue, that's going to affect your color blending as well, or your color mixing. So if you're using like a really dark green, which we're not using any secondaries today, we're only using red, yellow, and blue, but you get the point. You could, sometimes you have a golden yellow versus a canary yellow, and that can affect the color tone that you get. So just be aware of that when you're mixing and blending. Okay, so I'm going to go, again, usually have to do it a couple different layers, which that is fine. It does go faster with the more practice you have. So don't get discouraged if it takes you 5 layers or 6 layers. It probably won't, but. All right, so there's my red base. Again, I'm going to kind of go back on top of this with my blue. I feel like I should say something like, we're going to make a happy little color. Just like Bob Ross makes happy little trees. So say if you're using chalk pastels or oil pastels, chalk pastels I would say blend better when you use, you could use a blending stick with chalk pastels, or a tissue, or your finger even. I don't generally like blending with fingers, but I feel like with pastels and charcoals it's a little bit better there because of the medium itself is chalky, and I think it kind of helps prevent the oil in your fingers to make your paper look greasy, say versus on graphite. But anyways, you can see there I've got a purple tone now, and that was just 1 layer blue, 1 layer red. So I feel like I'm happy with that tone. I'm going to go ahead and move on. I can always go back and adjust these, and I might have to when I start working on my intermediate colors, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm happy with that for now, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to my orange. Again, this color requires yellow, so definitely put down your yellow first. But as I was saying with oil and chalk pastels, if you're using oil pastels, which are more like, for those of you that don't know, more kind of like fancy crayons. They're wax. They're like crayons are kind of wax based, but oil pastels are oil based. So they're creamier, richer colors. They blend really easy too. But I would not, you can blend with your finger on those. I don't really like the way they look. I feel like it gives a weird kind of finish to it, I suppose. So if you're using oil pastels, I would blend with another oil pastel. So say you're layering yellow on right now, and you go back and you go back and you layer your red on top of your yellow like I'm doing. With chalk pastel, after you do that, you could like use your finger to blend it. But with oil pastel, you would want to go back with the yellow again to blend it. They blend. I think they blend better. Anyways, that's my personal opinion when they blend with another oil pastel versus a finger. But don't worry too much about that. We're not going to do much in oil or chalk pastel this year. We might do a sketchbook assignment with that, but other than that, we don't really do a lesson. I do pastels more with my Art 2 class. But just if that's what you're working with today. Okay, so got my edges, layering my red on top of my yellow. I'm getting an orange tone. I'll probably go back. I'm kind of doing a second layer of red on top of my yellow, and I'll probably go ahead and do. It's a little trickier, I think, with the colors that require the yellow base, because you can see the different layers, I think, a little bit you can see the yellow and the red more shine through than say on purple. But you can tell though that I've got a green, a purple, and a red, or an orange. So after you get that done, we're going to go through, and if you're still working on that, just pause the video. We're going to work through and do the intermediate colors, or also known as the tertiary colors. So between yellow and green, we have yellow-green. And so we're going to still use our red and blue. We're not using any secondary colors today. We're still using these. The difference between what we do here versus what we do here is we need more yellow than blue here. So we're definitely going to still start with yellow on all of these colors that are going to still require yellow. But when we go back and do the blue, we just really have to go more easy with the blue, okay? Here we'll go a little bit heavier with the blue than we did here, if that makes sense. So you could even probably maybe press a little bit harder just so that you have a little bit more solid of a yellow base. Since this should be more yellow, you could probably thicken that up just a little bit. So I got my yellow. And I'm just going to go really easy. And the thing though, if this winds up being darker than this, we might have to, depending on how darker, we can always darken up our green some. But this just has to make sure that you wind up more yellow than this. This one needs to be more blue than this. So this is kind of our compare one. Or our, like if you were talking to science, our control, I guess. So I'm just going really easy with my blue. And that one, it's still, from what I could tell, is more yellow than this one. But I'm still, just to kind of blend it, I'm going to hit this with the yellow again. And there, that looks, and that's more green than this one. Okay, so we're using our primary and secondaries to kind of help compare how we layer our color in. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to my blue-green. If you're not ready, you can pause the video. Even though I want this one to still be darker than my green, I'm still going to start with my yellow base. Because I can always darken that blue pretty easy. And that's kind of what I'm going to do. I'm just going to kind of go in with a heavier layer of blue. I'm not going to go as easy on this one. And that's a pretty good blend, I would say. I've got more blue in this one than I have in here, but I have, you know, it's not as blue as that. I might still do just another little bit of blue in there. Okay. All right, moving on to this one is blue violet. Okay, and just a reminder, we always say the primary, when we're saying names of our intermediate colors, we always say the primary first. So this one is red violet, not purple violet, or purple blue, or violet blue. Okay, we always list primary first. That'll be on your test, so don't forget about that. So this is blue violet here, so I'm going to start with my blue base. Okay, I'll do my red. Now I'm going to go a little bit easier on my red. Again, I can always tweak this one if I need to. If they wind up being too similar. Okay, that still looks pretty blue-violet. It's purple, it's got purple, but it's got more blue. Ooh, don't need yellow. Totally grabbed the wrong one. It still looks more blue than purple, but more violet than blue. Okay. All right, and moving on to my red violet. Again, Make sure you're practicing your good coloring technique. Get your edges, overlapping your strokes as to not leave gaps. And if you do leave gaps or it still seems really strokey, just go back and hit it another direction, and that will help, maybe even another 2 directions, and that will help blend your strokes out. Okay, so I got my red base on this one because this is red violet. I'm going to start with a lighter tone of blue. Okay, I'm feeling like these two look too similar, so I'm going to hit this one back with some more red. There, that's a bit better. Just, I feel like I need a bit more blue on this side. There. Okay. So now, off to my red-orange. Again, this one needs a yellow. Start with yellow on this one because this orange and red make yellow. Or red and yellow make orange. You know what I mean. Okay, not going to go quite as heavy on my yellow, just so I can get more of my red to show through. Okay, I feel like my 2 oranges look pretty similar, so I'm going to hit this one with more red. I don't want it to look too red either. I want it to look orangey, so we'll do just a little bit more yellow. Okay. Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good red orange right there. Okay, and then last but not least, yellow orange. So I'm gonna go heavier with my yellow. And easier with my red. I'd say that's a pretty good yellow orange. So there you have it, guys. Work on this. Try to get good blends of your colors. Again, use your secondary and primary colors to kind of help base off what you need to do for your intermediate colors. And you can always, but I didn't really feel like I needed to go back and adjust mine, but sometimes I'll mix a secondary color, and maybe this one looks too close to this or too close to this, and I have to go back and maybe either lighten it up or darken it or whatever. But usually I try to do the adjustments here if I can. So sometimes, when you get into these lighter colors, it's a little bit harder to adjust those versus those. So if you're in class, you need to turn this into the basket when you're done. Make sure your name is on it, okay? If you are at home, make sure you draw this out and you color it and post a picture of it for today's assignment and attendance. So I will see you guys soon.